The dropship thundered through the morning sky, its metal plating gleaming under the South Carolina sun. It descended with the slow inevitability of a mountain falling from the heavens, kicking up a whirlwind of dust as it landed on the parade ground of Paris Island. Drill Sergeant Ramirez squinted through the grit, unfazed. She had seen plenty of strange things in her years as a Marine, but this was a first. The hatch hissed open with a sharp mechanical exhale, and out stepped General XYTAC, the Xener Dominion's undefeated champion. 8 feet tall, for arms like hydraulic pistons, and a body plated in organic armor that shimmered between steel and obsidian. His eyes, twin pools of burning gold, swept over the assembled recruits with a look of practiced superiority. Ramirez chewed her gum, unimpressed. "So, you're the big bad alien here to make us look stupid," she said. "I'll be honest, I was expecting more tentacles." XYTAC's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "I am here to conquer your training, to prove the superiority of a Xener over human warriors." Ramirez's lips curled into a smirk. "Oh, sweetheart, you don't conquer Bootcamp. You survive it." Behind her, the recruits stood at attention, barely suppressing their nerves. There was Danny, Specs and Gwyn, a wiry tech wizard who saw systems and solutions where others saw obstacles. Maria Alvarez, the idealist, who believed that warfare was only one small part of human strength. Leroy Wildcard Jackson, a walking contradiction, reckless, unpredictable, and somehow always one step ahead of disaster. And all of them, to a person, were looking at XYTAC with the kind of uncertainty usually reserved for incoming hurricanes. "All right, kids," Ramirez said, "let's give our guest the warmest welcome Paris Island has to offer. Obstacle course. Now!" A ripple of groans passed through the recruits, but no one dared complain outright. They ran. XYTAC did not run. He strode forward, each step gouging deep footprints into the sand. When the humans reached the first challenge, a series of wooden walls designed to test speed and agility, XYTAC merely leapt. 8 feet of raw muscle cleared the walls in a single bound. The recruits stared. Leroy whistled. "All right, that's kind of cool." The next challenge was a balance beam, suspended over a pit of muddy water. XYTAC, too large for the narrow plank, opted instead to simply walk to the pit, the sludge sloshing around his ankles. "Technically," Specs murmured, "that's not cheating." Ramirez folded her arms. "He can brute force his way through an obstacle course. Great, but the military isn't about one guy being strong." Her words proved prophetic at the next challenge, the rope climb. XYTAC reached for the rope, but the moment he put weight on it, the fibers snapped like overcooked noodles. He landed on his feet, unfazed, but the recruits were already chuckling. Maria, covered in sweat, grinned as she hauled herself up the rope. "Not so easy when you can't just power through, huh?" XYTAC frowned but said nothing. They continued. The log carry was a disaster. XYTAC's forearms made coordination impossible. The crawling drill left him tangled in barbed wire because he was too wide to fit properly under it. And when they reached the 10-mile run, his heavy frame turned his endurance into a liability. By the end of the course, the recruits were exhausted. XYTAC, for all his power, was frustrated. He had never struggled physically in his life. Ramirez clapped her hands. "All right, lesson number 1. The Marines don't care how strong you are. We care if you can work within the system." XYTAC's golden eyes narrowed. "I was not informed this was a test of cooperation." "Sweetheart, that's the whole point." She gestured at the exhausted recruits. "You think any of these kids would last 10 seconds in a fight with you?" XYTAC hesitated, then shook his head. "But put them together?" She gestured to the course. "You just got your ass kicked by a bunch of underfed teenagers." Leroy chuckled. "Bet you didn't see that coming." For the first time since arriving, XYTAC didn't have an immediate response. And for the first time since meeting him, Ramirez saw something in his expression that she hadn't expected. Doubt. The recruits had survived the first day of boot camp. XYTAC had survived, too. But he was beginning to realize survival wasn't enough. He had to adapt. And that, more than any obstacle, might be the one challenge he wasn't prepared for. XY was learning, and that made him dangerous. Sergeant Ramirez had seen recruits break down, tap out, or even snap under the relentless pressure of Marine training. She had never seen one adjust so quickly. The Xener general still struggled, of course. His sheer size made human-centric drills a logistical nightmare, but he was no longer simply brute-forcing his way through exercises. He was watching, calculating, and he was improving. It was Specs who noticed first. "He's mimicking us," he murmured during morning PT, watching XY shift his posture slightly to match the recruits. Like, down to the breathing patterns. "Yeah." Leroy grinned, cracking his knuckles. "Then let's give him something real fun to mimic. Physical training. Strength versus endurance." Ramirez, fully aware of what her recruits were scheming, set up a little experiment. Push-ups. The drill had always been simple. Drop and push until your arms scream, then keep going. The recruits fell into position, forearms brushing hot sand. XY followed. Ramirez smirked. "Begin." The first 20 were effortless for the alien. His forearms gave him twice the output, and he hammered through the exercise like a war machine. But then muscle control became an issue, for limbs did not fatigue evenly. His upper set of arms began compensating for the lower. His rhythm faltered. His breathing wasn't synchronized like the recruits, because he had 4 lungs, not 2. At push-up 75, his movements were jerky, struggling to distribute effort properly. By push-up 100, Maria passed him. By 150, Leroy passed him. By 200, even Specs, wheezing like a dying engine, kept going while XY collapsed onto his elbows. "What's the matter, champ?" Leroy panted, grinning. "Thought you were supposed to be better than us." XY scowled but said nothing. Lesson learned. Strength fades. Endurance wins. Weapons training. Firepower versus precision. On the firing range, the Xener general fared even worse. At first, the drill seemed like a non-issue. XY's own weapons, a sleek plasma rifle calibrated to his physiology, had been confiscated, and he was forced to use standard Marine firearms. Problem 1. His claws barely fit around an M16's grip. Problem 2. His sheer strength made aiming nearly impossible. The first time he squeezed the trigger, the recoil slammed the rifle upward, sending bullets wildly into the sky. The second time, he overcompensated, nearly breaking the weapon in half. Meanwhile, the recruits drilled with precision. Maria was the best marksman of the group, her breathing steady, her shots methodical. Specs wasn't far behind. His analytical mind turned bullet trajectory into a calculated science. Even Leroy, who took things less seriously, had better control than the alien warlord. By the end of the drill, XY had wasted twice the ammunition for half the accuracy. Ramirez chewed her gum thoughtfully. "Damn shame, big guy. You ever actually aim before, or do Xener just shoot in the general direction and hope for the best?" XY's mandibles twitched in irritation. He hated this. Lesson learned. Firepower is useless without control. Field tactics, chaos versus strategy. The recruits expected the night drill to be a disaster for XY. They were wrong. The goal was simple. Navigate 3 miles through rough terrain while avoiding detection from instructors patrolling the area. It was a test of stealth, teamwork, and decision-making under stress. XY should have failed immediately. He was too big for the underbrush. His armor plating reflected moonlight, and he wasn't exactly quiet. But he had been watching. When the drill began, the recruits moved in a coordinated unit, whispering commands, moving low, shifting with purpose. XY, he vanished. Ramirez had expected him to lumber through the mission like a walking beacon. Instead, he used his 4 limbs to cling to trees, maneuvering above the instructor's line of sight. His armor shifted colors, subtly blending into the environment. He wasn't moving like a Marine. He was moving like a predator. Specs noticed first. Where's XY? The recruits turned in a panic, just as a shadow dropped from the trees. Leroy barely suppressed a scream. "Bro, what?" XY crouched, mandibles clicking in amusement. Humans fight like prey. I fight like a hunter. Leroy scowled. Yeah, guess what? Big guy, we hunt in packs. Before XYTAC could respond, the recruits scattered. Their coordination was chaotic, but deliberate. They kicked up dirt, made noise in opposite directions, flanked without warning. XYTAC, used to one-on-one dominance, struggled against their unpredictability. He could track one target easily. Not 5. By the end of the drill, every recruit made it through undetected. XYTAC, caught twice. Lesson learned. A lone hunter loses against a coordinated pack. Breaking point. By the time the recruits returned to camp, the Zener general was tense. He wasn't used to failure. He had spent years training for war, perfecting his body, mastering battle. Yet these humans, smaller, weaker, slower, were winning. Ramirez studied him. Something on your mind, big guy? XYTAC hesitated. I was not expecting this. What? To struggle? She chuckled. Welcome to the club. That's the whole point. You fail, you learn, you grow. That's how we get better. XYTAC was silent for a long moment. Then, for the first time since his arrival, he asked a question. How do I adapt? Ramirez grinned. Now you're asking the right questions. XYTAC had never experienced exhaustion before. His body, engineered for war, sculpted through decades of elite training, was failing him in ways he couldn't comprehend. His muscles ached. His 4 lungs, built for high-oxygen environments, struggled against the thick, humid air of the South Carolina marshlands. His mind, once razor-sharp, was clouded by something alien to him, fatigue. And the worst part? The humans endured it better than he did. He saw it in the recruits. Danny, Specs and Gwyn, red-eyed from sleepless nights, still calculating radio frequencies on the move. Maria Alvarez, feet blistered, yet running ahead of him. Leroy Wildcard Jackson, too stubborn or too insane to admit that his legs were jelly. They were breaking, but they were not stopping. And neither could he, because now they were in the Crucible. 54 hours of hell. The Crucible was the final test. 54 hours. 50 miles. 40 pounds of gear. Barely any sleep. Simulated combat scenarios designed to push recruits beyond their limits. For humans, it was grueling. For XYTAC, it was impossible. The forced march began in the dead of night. The recruits moving in formation, rifles slung over their shoulders. XYTAC, too large a standard gear, carried double the weight, a challenge Ramirez had personally assigned to test his limits. At first, he powered through. But after 10 miles, his legs began to tremble. By 15, his breathing was ragged. At 20, his vision blurred. Then he stumbled. The recruits kept moving. No one was allowed to stop. But then Maria slowed. Get up, she whispered, nudging his shoulder. XYTAC clenched his jaw. I do not require. She shoved him. Hard. Shut up and get up. Through sheer force of will, he staggered to his feet, marching forward, his pride wounded more than his body. Lesson learned. Humans don't let each other fall behind. Tactical drills. Thinking like a human. The second phase was tactical combat. The recruits were split into 2 teams, one defending a hill, the other attacking. XYTAC was assigned to lead the defenders. At first, he treated it like a Zener war game. Establish strong points. Overwhelm the enemy with force. Hold ground through sheer dominance. It was a disaster. Specs jammed his comms with a frequency disruptor. Maria and Leroy flanked from 2 sides at once, forcing XYTAC's team into confusion. Then, in the middle of the chaos, a smoke grenade rolled into his position. A single voice rang out in the haze. Semper Gumby, Motherf. Leroy tackled XYTAC head-on, knocking the alien warlord off his feet. By the time the smoke cleared, the hill was lost. XYTAC sat in stunned silence. Ramirez crouched next to him. Fun fact, Semper Gumby means always flexible. If you can't adapt, you lose. XYTAC had never lost as badly before. And worse, it made sense. Lesson learned. Strength without strategy is meaningless. The breaking point. The final phase was a night raid. The recruits had gone nearly 2 days without sleep, their bodies screaming for rest. XY could barely stand. His limbs felt slow, his reactions dull. The mighty warlord who once thought himself invincible was now just as weak as the humans beside him. The mission: infiltrate an enemy base and retrieve a wounded soldier while avoiding detection. The problem? XY was a liability. His size made stealth nearly impossible. His heavy footfalls announced their presence, and when they finally reached the objective, he hesitated, his body simply refusing to respond as quickly as he commanded. The instructors spotted them. Alarms blared. Failure. XY collapsed onto his knees, mandibles clenching in frustration. He had tried. He had truly tried. And he had still failed. For the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if he could succeed. Ramirez stepped forward, looking down at him. "Now," she said, her voice softer than usual. "You're finally where every recruit gets before they become a Marine." XY lifted his head. Ramirez crouched in front of him, chewing her gum thoughtfully. That moment when you think you can't. When your body's dead, your mind's fried, and every part of you is screaming to quit. She smirked. That's when you decide who you really are. XY stared at her, heart pounding in his chest. "You want to be better than us?" Ramirez asked. "Then prove you can suffer like us." Silence. Then, slowly, XY stood. His legs trembled. His breath came in ragged gasps. But he stood. Leroy let out a low whistle. "Damn. I think the big guy might actually get it." Maria nodded. "Welcome to the real fight, XY." The alien warlord, for the first time in days, gave a small, tired grin. "We continue." Ramirez's smirk widened. "Now you're talking." Dawn broke over Paris Island, its golden light stretching across the battered recruits. They were dead on their feet. 54 hours of the Crucible had left them stripped of everything except willpower. Their uniforms were torn, their muscles burned, and their minds barely functioned. But they had made it. XY stood among them. He had not conquered Marine training. It had conquered him, and in doing so, it had reshaped him into something new. For the first time in his life, he was not the strongest, not the fastest, not the best. Yet, somehow, he had never felt stronger. The final march. The last challenge was a Reaper, a grueling 10-mile march, carrying full gear, meant to symbolize the transition from recruit to Marine. The instructor said nothing. There were no orders barked, no punishments for slowing down. If a recruit collapsed, it was their squad mates, not the sergeants, who pulled him back up. They marched. XY body screamed. His joints, never meant for such prolonged stress, ground against one another. Every breath was fire. And then, 5 miles in, Maria stumbled. She tried to push forward, but her legs buckled. Her rifle slipped from her grip. She was done. XY didn't hesitate. Before she could fall, he caught her. Without a word, he shifted her weight onto his shoulder, adding her burden to his own. The other recruits noticed. Leroy, bruised and battered, fell in beside him, stabilizing Maria from the other side. Specs, barely keeping pace, adjusted her gear to lessen the weight. They marched together, not as individuals, not as warriors, as a unit. By the time they reached the finish line, they were carrying each other. Lesson learned. A Marine is never alone. The graduation. The recruits stood in formation, freshly pressed uniforms hiding their exhaustion. The eagle, globe, and anchor sat in Ramirez's hand, a symbol of their transformation. She walked down the line, placing the emblem in each recruit's palm. Maria held hers like a sacred artifact, her exhaustion replaced by quiet pride. Specs, who had doubted himself since day one, swallowed hard, his fingers gripping the metal like proof that he belonged. Leroy, for once, had nothing to say. He just smiled. Then Ramirez reached XY. She didn't hand him an emblem. Instead, she studied him. "You're not a Marine," she said. Silence. XY, despite everything, felt something deep inside him sink. Then Ramirez smirked. "But you're sure as hell not just a Zener anymore." She held out her hand. XY hesitated, then took it. A handshake. A warrior's recognition. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just a conqueror. He was something more. Epilogue, the true victory. As the recruits celebrated that night, XY sat on the barrack steps, staring up at the stars. He had come here to prove the Xener's superiority. Instead, he had learned that strength wasn't about power. It was about endurance. It was about adapting, failing, and pushing forward anyway. Humans weren't the strongest species. They were something far more dangerous. They refused to break. Maria sat beside him, handing him a beer. So what now? XY considered. Then, for the first time in his life, he truly smiled. Now, he said, cracking it open, I learned what it means to fight like a human. Semper Gumby, always flexible, always ready for the next challenge.